There we go. Okay, great. So we're live on air. Good afternoon. Welcome to Insiders Inc. We're here with the head of global marketing for Twitter, Miss Dana Middleton, and we're here to talk about the session that she took part in at AdTech San Francisco that took place here last week. And the topic of the session was earning the love from social influencers, Alex from Target and breaking the internet. So, Ms. Middleton, welcome.
Thank you so much.
If I could start off by asking you to just give us a run through about the talk that took place last week and what some of the key takeaways were.
Sure. So it was an interesting conversation because we had myself representing Twitter. We had kind of an agency or startup point of view, and then we had a number of agencies that operate in the influencer space. So those who are working both with influencers and with brands to match make opportunities where brands can actually leverage influencers. So it's an interesting conversation, I think, just talking about the evolution of participation, if you will, which is one of my favorite topics, which is really how brands can leverage people to actually talk about their brands, and obviously influencers is a way to do that. So it was an interesting conversation, at least between panel members, and then I think a lot of individuals in the audience had just questions, because I think a lot of brands are struggling with this new space. How do I manage it in the construct of all the other marketing tools that I'm trying to manage?
Great. Well, yeah, and to that, I actually wanted to come to the power of the influencer has been something that people have been talking a long time, especially in terms of how brands can leverage that. And I know there's been countless examples, most recently with Alex from Target. But I just wanted to ask, how do you see these influencers leveraging these tools, and how valuable are these influencers to brands as the tools get more sophisticated for them to kind of broadcast their messages out there?
Sure. So I think there's two ways to look at this. I think Alex from Target example is something about a brand being very reactive, right? It wasn't something that Target necessarily staged, but they jumped into the conversation as they saw it happening because they were listening and monitoring and actively participating with their audience on an ongoing basis. So I think that's one element, and I think it's also really important. It also leverages the power of now, really, and demonstrates, right, if you had missed that opportunity, or if Target had missed that opportunity within 48 hours, it was old news. So the timeliness of being in tune, understanding what was going on, knowing how to participate in the conversation when it was the right time and place, I think is one key. And then there was a whole conversation around, what if I'm looking for an influencer to be an advocate for my brand? How do I find them? How do I engage with them? What type of relationship do I have with them? How do I go about doing that? And that's more of a proactive rather than reactive approach in leveraging. And I think both are probably relevant, and brands are experimenting and hopefully doing both if they're managing their constituents in a smart way. But it is, they're very different activities to a certain extent. One more long-term, thinking about this ongoing relationship and how a brand partners with an influencer, and the other one stepping into a conversation when it's very timely and relevant.
Mm-hmm. And that's really interesting. And that brings me to thinking, based on what you've just been saying there, when I start to think about influencers from a brand's perspective, I think, how do I leverage, because there's the organic influencer, and there's in some cases there's an influencer who already is out there who's actually looking to connect with the brands. But from an influencer who happens in a much more organic relationship, I'm wondering how do the brands, when they do partner with someone in an unexpected way with an influencer, how do they manage their sort of the drive through to the point of purchase for the customer, in terms of the customer journey from being influenced from the influencer across social to the point of converging, engaging with the brand, and then leading to the point of purchase?
Well, or and if purchase is even the intent. So I think the most important thing in today's marketing, and this is broader than just influencer marketing, is understanding what action are you expecting your people to take as a result of the activity that you're driving. Sometimes it's not purchase. Sometimes it's getting them to participate and provide feedback. Sometimes it's recommending to a friend. Sometimes it's, it could be a variety of different actions. And I think that's probably the most important question to answer first, and then driving your program around that. So if it is about driving to purchase, it's also understanding the touch points and, again, understanding the interactions that will occur so you can actually track that and measure it. I think when it comes to influencers, I think what's important is just understanding the advocacy and honestly understanding what actions you're trying to get your audience to take. It's funny because I think when I came from the agency side of the business, and we saw a lot of clients who would jump right to how am I going to measure this, but they didn't necessarily answer that question first. And if you answer the question what action you want people to take, it will automatically answer how you're going to measure it as well. But it also, hopefully, more importantly, might dictate what's the program going to look like, what elements am I going to put in place, how do I start this relationship? And I think more and more brands are understanding that it's not, you can't separate customer acquisition or purchase from customer engagement. And you saw a lot of conversation around that in the panel as well. And you just think about Amazon has trained us all really well, right? How many times have you purchased a product without looking at current customer reviews of it? And so putting those pieces together and putting the holistic customer journey together so you can really have that and examine it and manage it as marketing is becoming more and more important.
No, yeah, certainly, and it's interesting that you comes to that topic as well, because I've been looking a lot at social gifting and the impact that has in terms of driving sales for brands, and it certainly is condensing down the in terms of convincing a consumer to buy or engage in the brand. It certainly seems to me that it's taking away part of that kind of process or the customer journey in regards to from the discovering the brand to wanting to become fully engaged in it. And I know Twitter's been rolling out a whole suite of very interesting tools that cater towards the kind of social gifting. And I wonder and if there is even, I'm not entirely sure if there's even some measurable data to show how social influencers who leverage social gifting, what impact that also has on brands.
Yeah, so I don't know if I have any examples that show the connection between social gifting and influencers directly. I think, again, if you look at the suite of tools that Twitter is trying to embrace, it's providing anyone with a whole suite of tools depending on what action they want people to take. So think of video. We have Vine, which are loop videos. We have Periscope, which is live engagement videos. We have photos. There's so many different actions that people can take when they're utilizing Twitter, and I think that's the most important thing to consider. Is that we're providing a whole suite of tools, whether you're an advertiser or you're a person trying to communicate. We're trying to embrace the fact that people really like the diversity of the ways to communicate. So,
yeah, and as you mentioned Periscope there. I mean, Twitter's had a very interesting past 12 months in terms of acquisitions. I mean, how do you see? I mean, I know we're still very much at the early stages. There's been some really great examples of how people use Periscope already, but going forward, how do you see influencers and brands leveraging these new suite of tools like Periscope?
Yeah, so the two tools that I think are worth noting compared to in reference to the panel that we talked about last week. The first one is Periscope, which I think is relatively new, and we're not using it in a commercial sense yet. A lot of brands are experimenting with it to see what's working, what's not. The example that I verbalized last week was Land Rover. If you think about Land Rover, has always been one to really visually immerse and experience immerse their customers and their advocates. And so Periscope is just another way to do that. You know, let's get in the vehicle and cross a river live with me using Periscope, for example. It's just another tool in their toolkit. How that will benefit their brand and how they fit it within the construct of all the other tools they use, I think the jury's still out. It's pretty new. But it is fun to see how quickly a number of brands really embrace the tool and are already starting to utilize it. So the other tool that I think, or other acquisition that I think is relevant in this space, is that we acquired a company called Niche. And Niche really provides that end-to-end white glove service, if you will, to support brands in this influencer space. So basically, it's not a one-to-many approach. It really is for our top-level brands who are looking to have help in finding the right influencer, negotiating the contract, putting the programs together, and executing them. And it's not just on Twitter that Niche operates. It really is across a variety of different social channels.
Yeah, and in regards to the influencers and obviously leveraging these new tools, and you talked about Land Rover, but what impact would you say is it having in terms of demographics? Is it having more an impact on millennials, on the old generation, or does it just depend on the brand? And also, it doesn't matter whether you're from the millennial generation or from.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I think many people believe that Twitter is very much just a millennial brand, but that's actually not true. We have quite a wide range of demographics across the platform, and the same would be true, I would think, in terms of something like Periscope. I don't know that we have demographics on that yet. I haven't seen them. If we do, it'll be interesting to see. And quite frankly, I was just doing a presentation I'm preparing for next week, talking about push television versus the traditional television. And if you look like it's driving really untraditional habits. And one of the largest growing segments of actually time-shifted TV, so watching television or a program of some type on a laptop or a tablet, is like the 50 to 65 age group, right? And you would not expect that. So I think the really important thing if you're a brand is really understand who you're trying to reach, and then obviously using the many tools that we have to help understand what are the right social tools, what are the right social levers even within those platforms to help drive the type of engagement that you're looking to achieve.
Yeah, and I'm glad you've actually addressed that and brought that up. I mean, the second screen's really become quite an incredible phenomenon, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems to be quite an important part of Twitter's business in terms of being able to sort of generate the kind of traffic and drive-through and engagement that people are having across live shows and live TV through Twitter. And I just wonder how are the suite of tools going to evolve to accommodate the sort of hybrid level of entertainment across these multiple screen experiences.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is it's not just second screen, right? It's third screen and fourth screen in many cases. I only wish that I had actually bought stock in coffee tables that had plugins in them. But you look at a classic living room and it's just littered with different devices, and at any given time someone can actually be watching television and watching it on their mobile device along with the television, or watching it on their tablet, or watching it on their laptop, right? There are really 4 screens to consider. And so this is one of the reasons I think having a variety of different mediums in which you can actually use Twitter to engage, whether that be photographs or videos or what have you, I think it's going to be really important to be active on all of those. One of the things that we've determined, which is kind of interesting, is that we actually know that people are somehow more emotionally engaged when it comes to having their television with Twitter versus without. We've actually done some neuroscience that shows that. So if they're watching television and we take Twitter away from them, they're less emotionally engaged, which is really interesting. And I think we'll continue to see the evolution of how people utilize multiple screens. I don't think we're going to put it back in the box. People are not going to go back to just doing one or the other. The challenge and opportunity for brands as well as for platforms like Twitter is to help continue to stay ahead of that curve and provide people with more and more ways to engage as it fits and suits their needs.
Yes, certainly. And another buzzword that's going around at the moment, or it's been going around for some time now, is obviously the Internet of Things, and how pervasive technology is. And I'm just really curious as well to know how that's going to fit into brand products as well, in terms of enhancing the experience.
Yes, I think it's actually a fascinating topic. So several years ago, 4 years ago, I wrote a book called Marketing in the Participation Age. And the notion really was that we are human, right? So really understanding the essence of what it requires, what's the formula if you want someone to participate with you, is really important for brands to understand and remember today. But what's interesting about the Internet of Things is suddenly you have devices starting to communicate on your behalf. So yes, you're human, but then you also are not human, and how does a brand deal with that? So right, my Nest constantly communicates on my behalf. Will my watch start to communicate on my behalf? Does my phone start to communicate on my behalf? And so I think the challenge, the next really iteration for marketers is trying to figure out, how do I put those things together? How do I as a marketer start to understand when it's a human and I need to have more of a human engagement versus when I need to deal with someone's machine that's communicating for them on their behalf. And so I think that's going to be a very interesting challenge, because the next, if you look at the title of my book, was Marketing in the Participation Age. So the next era of the participation age will be not just humans participating, it actually is machines participating. And so I think that's a really interesting challenge moving forward. And I don't have the answer for it yet.
I mean, participation is certainly is incredible. Even the rate and the speed at which it's moved, in terms of when we talk about even when we talk about influentials, 5 years ago, they didn't have the reach they had without Twitter. So it's really interesting to see how like you said, participation will evolve. But it's certainly, for the time being, seems that it's within the hands of the everyman. And I'm personally really interested to see how that will continue to evolve, what kind of shapes and forms of entertainment and brand engagement we'll see that comes across through Twitter. I mean, it's a really exciting time for Twitter. I mean, I know that they've went public, and that they've now gone through a considerable number of acquisitions. I mean, where does Twitter go next? I suppose that's my question.
Yeah, I don't know that I have the answer completely to that. I think the challenge and opportunity that we have, as I mentioned, is keeping up and making sure that we're staying ahead of the curve, and keeping abreast as how quickly this whole marketplace is moving. Obviously, as a marketer, the fragmented marketplace continues to be amazingly fragmented, and so from an acquisition standpoint, it's our opportunity to really pull those things in that help really marketers capture the power of now. I think that's the unique thing that Twitter brings to the table. Now it means a lot of things. It means not only in the moment, but it's how do you exponentialize, for lack of a better word, I don't think that word exists, but how do you exponentialize everything you do in an effective manner? And so I think that really is the opportunity for Twitter, is to capitalize on that and provide that as a real tool and a partner for brands to make that happen. And if you think about that as a person as well, so I use Twitter personally for those things. Whether it helps me understand what's going on right in the moment, and it also really keeps me up to speed and abreast on all the things that I'm really passionate about. So I think, like I say, that is our opportunity, and that's really our differentiator in the marketplace.
No, that's really interesting. I'm going to close it up shortly, because I know I don't want to take too much of your time. Sure. But I did actually have a question myself that I wanted to kind of pick it up from where you left off, was how do you see, when we talk about, especially today in terms of content marketing, there's a whole range of different forms of a marketing mix and marketing content that's out there. Across we see Facebook that's moving very aggressively into embedded videos and sort of in certain cases, some people are expressing, whether it's warranted or not, some concerns that they're starting to eat away at the margins that YouTube are making in terms of the ad revenue that they generate through their pre-rolls. I mean, in terms of Twitter, in terms of accommodating content creators and content itself across the publishing platform, what kind of where is the focus? Is it across a whole range of different formats, or is Twitter looking to focus? Because Twitter itself is also obviously through the acquisition of Periscope. That's an element focusing on video, and then I know that they've also been working at the start of this year. Well, before that, but obviously it's been public knowledge at the start of this year that there's a lot going on with Twitter in terms of being able to embed video into the Twitter timeline. So I'm just curious to know, what is it specifically? Is Twitter specifically focusing on video-based content, or is it a sort of dynamic mix of content formats?
Yes. So I know content marketing, if you look at historically, and I think this will continue to be the case, visual content of any kind is really compelling and powerful, and that's true for individuals as well as it is for brands. So even before this year, as you mentioned, we had already ventured into the video space with the acquisition of Vine and had classic video. We also have imagery being embedded into the feed. And so I think obviously visual content is really important. So Twitter is understanding and recognizing that, and I don't think you'll see us standardize necessarily on one format or another, but obviously trying to stay ahead of that and meet the demand, because the demand really is visual content. And I think that really came about in 2012. You look like we hit kind of this tipping point of information verbiage overload, and that was true for search. If you saw, Pinterest really started to pop during then, and that was really about visual content. So we really are at a time and era of visual content, and certainly as a valid platform in the space, Twitter has to be relevant there, and so you'll see that continue, I'm sure. I like I say, I don't have purview to what other acquisitions we have in play or a complete product roadmap for that matter. But in terms of providing people, whether you're an individual and you want to post content, visual content's really important, even if you're a brand as well. So,
no, for sure. And I'm just going to come away and look at some of the final questions that I had. And in the next kind of 3 to 6 months, or before the end of this year, I know that there's been, like we've mentioned, there's been a lot of acquisitions Twitter has been involved with and done. But can you tell us a little bit about some of the more recent acquisitions, like for example Telepart, and how that will allow marketers to retarget users on multiple devices?
Yeah, Telepart is so new that I don't have a lot of information, honestly. I mean, as much as I do. It's similar to Tap Commerce in the sense of helping our advertisers understand better, who they're talking to and reach them in a more effective way. I think that's going to be very compelling. Niche, obviously, that I already talked about, it was probably the one most recent prior to that. Let's see, what was right before that? I think Tap was before that. So obviously, yes, I mean, it's almost, if you look at 3 to 5 years ago, the number of acquisitions versus the last probably 6 to 24 months, it's a rapid ramp. And I think part of that is reflective of the importance of us to maintain competitiveness and making sure that we have the tools in our toolkit to provide great experiences both for users as well as for brands.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, and an exciting time as well for brands in terms of engaging with this suite of tools. And finally, another question that I had was in regards to the impulse purchase trend that's kind of been that's been occurring for some time now. I know that Twitter started rolling out their buy button I know rolling out may not be the right word, but they've started testing it out in the marketplace in September with brands like Burberry and so on. And now I know that they've recently been launched a buy button, though. Old Spice has been introducing the buy button as well. I mean, I'm also interested to know from a brand's perspective, what kind of data does Twitter provide in terms of the being able to measure the conversion rates and from the purchase button?
Yeah, so obviously it depends on our connection to the brand and how they're closing that purchase out. That's true for, it would be any platform. So if you have a buy button, we still have to connect to somewhere to complete the transaction, right? So our data is as good as the brands in terms of most brands who do this have active access to their complete data so that they can track it. That's the smart thing to do. As you mentioned, not only this year, but even last, if you look at some of the experimentation we were doing to, I don't know if you saw the feature that was Amazon Add to Cart. So if you saw a feature, you could actually tweet to add to cart and actually buy through Amazon. So that's a track path purchase. Obviously, it's not just our data. It would be Amazon's complete data. So the point is, one of the things I think that we're doing well is trying to provide access for brands to track these things end to end, because as we all know in the mobile marketplace, that's a very difficult thing to do. It's a very fragmented marketplace. So anything that we can do to drive partnerships, you saw the partnership that we just drove with Google, to provide advertisers with an end-to-end view to find out if their actual marketing is working or not is key. I think that it will continue to be a top priority because it is a top priority for brands to really understand what's effective and what's not.
And also to that, I mean, social e-commerce seems to be something that's got such a huge potential in terms of revenue growth over the next few years. I know eMarketer came out with some data alluding to that fact. So I can well imagine that this is something that's gonna also, I presume, also help the Twitter grow as well as lead generation and obviously revenue generated through the purchase buttons and plugins and platforms like Twitter that provide that service. I was also interested to know, I know Amazon, you talked about Amazon. I know Amazon's also focusing at the moment on repeat purchasing buttons. I mean, there was this story with Tide where you can get a device and then it automatically will ship out your. I mean, my final question is, how effective do you think that is? And also, are we likely to see Twitter integrate a repeat purchase button option into that kind of impulse purchase?
Interesting. I don't know, the repeat purchase is interesting. I don't know that we've considered it or talked about it or have plans for it. Amazon, obviously, it's in their best interest. They know their customer base. They know what you've purchased. I'm a huge Amazon Prime member myself. Use their app very well. You can actually reorder something using your thumbprint. So it will be interesting to see the space. I think in terms of growth, obviously, not only buy, but even mobile. Mobile if you saw Mary Meeker's study that was released yesterday, there's still a huge opportunity for revenue growth in mobile, and I think that's still a strong suit for Twitter and something that you'll see us continue to really excel and capitalize on is our strength in mobile.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting and also very exciting, and certainly mobile is it seems to be the way that everyone is going in full steam. Obviously, then the next stage will be augmented reality and virtual reality. But for now, I think it's very interesting to see how things will evolve across mobile. And to that, I'm going to close out this interview and just say thank you very, very much, Dana, for joining us today and giving us a little insight into the power of the influencers and how Twitter is working with brands and influencers to reach audiences, and the new suite of tools that are being rolled out by Twitter. It's a great platform. I know that there's a huge and ardent fan base for Twitter. I'm one of them. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out next and see what kind of acquisitions you guys are going to
do. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks very much, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. All right.
All right.
Thank you. Bye.